City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded November 4, 2024.
We will call the City Plan Commission meeting to order. Roll call, Mayor Weeza's present. Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Beacom.
Here.
And Muskowiak.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
And Schuler.
Here.
Everyone is present. Thank you all for joining us. Just a quick show of hands. Who's voted already? Okay. Who's going to vote tomorrow? Better be everybody else. All right. Good. Thank you very much for doing that. Very, very important. The agenda has a couple of public hearings on it tonight. We do have some students here. Thank you very much for attending. They did tell you about the presentation? I just like doing that. There's no presentation. Anyone wishing to speak during a public hearing is not required to register ahead of time. We'll declare the public hearing open. Just step to the lectern and provide the testimony. Item number 2 is the report of the October 7th meeting of the Plan Commission. Those minutes and actions were before you, Commissioners.
I move to approve.
Moved by Arnson.
Second.
Seconded by Muskowiak. Discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a public hearing with subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend the official street map for the City of Stevens Point. The request renames Lost Creek Road to Forest Creek Road with lots 1 through 60 and the parcels identified in your packet of the Forest Creek Subdivision. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. So members of the commission, I'm sure, are quite aware of. We recently went through the creation of the Forest Creek Subdivision on the far east side of town, just north of Fleet Farm. As folks know, as part of the official street map amendment, it included not only the configuration of the planned streets, but also the naming of said streets. So you see back a few months ago, we named this new street running east-west, and I'll have the mayor put his cursor on where the street in question is. A few months ago, that was named Lost Creek Road. Ultimately, as folks know, folks might think that the naming of a street is a pretty mundane, a pretty obsolete type of practice, but there's a lot of implications to it, especially
the dispatch.
Exactly, especially when you're considering emergency responses and making sure that there's no hiccups or no concerns that may be had. As you can see on the image on the right-hand side of the screen, there is also, beyond just a Lost Creek Road, there is a Lost Creek Lane just to the north and east, about 2/3 of a mile away from this planned street. It's too close for comfort on my end, and along with other city staff as well. So this request is merely just to rename that street from Lost Creek Road to Forest Creek Road. As I reiterated in the memorandum, there is no change in the features of the roadway that's being proposed. It's simply just a changing of the name. So staff will recommend approval.
Okay. Any questions before I open up the public hearing? Pretty simple. We're going to finally get an answer. I'm going to get to you on number 5. Mark can explain it. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on this name change, step to the lectern and provide that testimony. Public hearing remains open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. It's a legal requirement for the public hearing, so we have to announce it 3 times. Seeing no one wishing to speak, we will declare the public hearing closed, bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes? Alder Kneebone.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Muskowiak. Discussion. Comments from the audience? Hearing, and entered. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance of the Revised Municipal Code of Stevens Point. Said request amends Section 23.04 sub 2 for the purposes of repealing the household entity plus definition and amending the definition of household entity as follows. Household entity is an individual or 2 or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, foster child arrangement, or similar legal relationship and functioning as a single housekeeping entity, or such individual or person plus two individuals and their dependents not having such similar legal relationship but functioning as part of a single housekeeping entity. The definition of household entity shall not apply to a tourist rooming house. Basically what this is in the city of Stevens Point, prior to about 2 years ago, year and a half, no more than two unrelated people could live in the same unit unless it was zoned, what do you call it, grandfathered in, right?
Grandfathered in.
Grandfathered. About a year and a half ago, we changed that in an attempt to address some of the housing shortage issues to allow more than two, in this case, three unrelated people being able to live in the same household if the owner was one of those three people. So owner occupied. We have had no significant issues, actually no issues that I know about. We're going to talk about that. Now we're looking at moving it to just three unrelated people, lifting effectively the owner occupancy requirement. Adam, do you want to say anything additional to that before we open the public hearing?
Yeah, so as the mayor mentioned, probably starting about 2 years ago, this commission went through the ample discussions about amending the city's definition of family at the time, now called household entity. Ultimately, there was a lot of conversations, rightfully so, when considering a change in our zoning ordinance, making sure that any potential concerns or issues that may result of said change, that it's carefully analyzed to make sure that it doesn't cause more harm than good. So some of the comments, or some of the concerns rather, that were raised at the time were considerations related to parking, noise, and the example I gave in the memorandum, really maintaining that ratio of owner-occupied housing units versus that of renter-occupied housing units here in the city. Making sure that we don't do such a swift change that it really skews that ratio in one, along one spectrum versus the other. So ultimately, through these ample conversations about 2 years ago, this commission took more of the incremental approach, as the mayor mentioned, having a 3-2 option, an incentive for owner-occupied housing, with the expectation that at some point in the future, we would have a follow-up conversation to see what were the impacts, positive, negative, and ultimately to see, are you folks fine with the status quo, or are you amenable to some sort of revision to it? So as the mayor mentioned, what issues have I noticed? Honestly, it's been pretty minimal over the last 18 months. Prior to the zoning code change that happened early last year, there was always infrequent concerns that were presented regarding parking, noise, and the like. I haven't seen an uptick in concerns concerns that were raised to me since this change in our zoning code took place. Ultimately, as I mentioned in the memorandum, there's a couple options that's really at play for you folks. And I think the first question is, first and foremost, do you want to change or do you want to maintain the status quo? And if you do want to have a change, the recommendation I would have for you folks is to still maintain this incremental approach as what's included in the agenda, to just have it even 3 across the board. As we talked about a couple years back, shifting it on one end of the spectrum, shifting it too much does have some implications, i.e., say hypothetically the number is changed from 2 to 6, right? Number is changed to 6 and there's a lot of issues that come about. It's not like we as a city can revert back to that 2 number and expect everybody to conform with this new code. As the mayor mentioned, they're grandfathered in, so even if we change a code, if we experience some issues, it's not like we can compel those property owners that took advantage of this change of zoning ordinance to comply back to current law. So ultimately, the choice is yours. If there's questions that folks have about really what happened over the last 18 months that you want to learn more about, let me know. Otherwise, from a staff perspective, I would have no issue with the proposal as presented.
Okay. Before we open the public hearing, are there any questions, clarifying questions from the commissioners? Mr. Arnson?
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I'm still a little unclear about this definition. Actually, I think I'm getting better with it, but is the, and their dependents. Are dependents the same as the definition, two or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, foster child care arrangement?
Yes,
So that's,
they're the same. If I claim you as a dependent on my taxes, you fall under that definition here.
but how about a brother related by blood?
That's related by blood. If that's a dependent,
But it's not a
Could be a
dependent
dependent.
necessarily.
then they wouldn't be a dependent, but they still would be a blood relative.
Right,
The-
right.
the
And so that's what
definition-
I'm wondering
Okay.
about this. A number of things about the wording of this, the definition, the household entity. So my understanding of this reads, a household entity is a household entity, which is an individual, two or more persons, et cetera, plus another household entity, which is the same thing. And then if you're an owner occupied, it's another household entity, so you got three, so using the old terms, family, you got a family plus a family, and then if you're an owner occupied, it's another family. And I'm good with that, but I had to kind of work through it to figure it out. And the
that's
terminology.
That's what it is. So when you're talking about or such individual or persons plus two individuals and their dependents, it could be my brother and his dependent. That's one family, though. We're
Right.
blood relatives, so that's one. If Commissioner Schuler or Alderperson Kneebone wanted to move in with her
Dorothy
seven
and Rose.
kids, Dorothy and Rose, that would be legal too. I don't see that happening. We're not getting a whole lot of families moving in together, but this is really designed to help alleviate some of that
Yeah, and
restrictiveness.
I'm good with that. And then, just being nitpicky, grammarian type thing, two individuals and their dependents. Does that mean the dependents of the two individuals, or is it two individuals plus each individual's dependents? I think that's what it means, but I don't know that's what it says.
It means two individuals and their dependents. So if I have dependents and Mary has dependents and Jared has dependents, we can all live together. We're not going to.
I don't know that it says that. It says two
Two individuals and their
dependents. Like Mike and, or Jeff and me and our children, right? We're unrelated, but
Okay.
it takes the two of us as opposed to me and my kid and him and his kid.
Okay, do you have a recommendation to clarify that?
No, I leave it to the experts.
Hey, hang on, nope, we can't do that, sorry.
But I'd appreciate it if you
Yeah,
would.
when
Eventually.
we get a time to get up there, that would be fine. You see how it's worded? I didn't read it any other way, and that's,
You were biased.
well, I am biased because we were there when we wrote it.
Right,
Well,
I know,
didn't write it,
exactly.
They wrote it.
Some people
We
read
discussed it, yeah.
weren't
yeah.
there.
So, I know what we meant, but it's good, yeah, there may be people who that's not clear to. All right, we'll discuss that afterwards. Any questions before I open the public hearing? Yes?
Yeah, maybe question or some clarification. So the change is essentially only going to have an effect on kind of rented properties, right? I mean, because it doesn't change the definition for someone who is the homeowner and wants to have
Right,
additional.
this would be non-owner occupied, which still could be a rental.
Do we know roughly a number of parcels or units or a percentage of rental property within the city that isn't already grandfathered in to accept more than two individuals? Because there is a lot of student housing, historic student housing that wouldn't require this change to continue moving,
it's-
having more than two people.
You have an idea, Adam? Because citywide, the student housing is dense around the university.
Right.
But outside that, you don't see that a lot at all.
Right.
So if I were to ballpark it, I would say less than 10% of the rental stock is grandfathered in for more than three unrelated or two unrelated.
There's also a significant amount of rental stock, I would imagine, I don't have a good grasp, that is, one or two bedroom that wouldn't accommodate, the number of, dwellers,
Yeah.
unit dwellers.
And all of the other restrictions would still apply,
Yeah.
square footage and.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the actual impact of a change like this? Is this going to impact 100 units across our city, or is it going to impact, 1,000 units across our city? And I understand that we don't have hard numbers here, but any estimation would be maybe helpful.
That was the best guess that I had. And that's really just a guess from knowing about what we have. So they're not hard numbers.
Okay.
But that's about the best I can give you right now, I'm sorry. Any other clarifying questions, again, before I open the public hearing? And we'll have time to talk about this after the public hearing as well. All right, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step to the lectern. I should note, while you're getting prepared, that we did receive a couple of comments via email. John Gardner, Greg Hansel, Carol Steltenpohl. All of those were shared with all of the commissioners and are available at the Community Development Department. But we're not going to read them. We'd be here all night. Go ahead.
I'm Jane Johnson, a citizen of Stevens Point on Summers Street. For your grammar question, I was an English teacher first. So the way it reads right now, plus two individuals and their dependents would go back to those two individuals. What you might be missing is the individual or person and their dependents, right? Because right now how it reads, that first individual and person might not be inclusive with those dependents. So you might want to read something like, and any dependents of those three individuals, something like that.
Adam? Yeah. Make note.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As someone who served on the city's housing task force, 2 to 3 years ago? And the task force that presented this proposal originally, I am urging you to pass this amendment. We all know, and we knew then and we know now, it's only gotten worse, that there's a housing crisis, not only here, but pretty much everywhere. But in particular, for those who have no or low income and for young adults looking to buy their first home. We just do not have enough housing stock. This amendment will help both of these issues. Will it resolve these issues? No. It is one tool. We are going to require many tools and many ways forward to resolve the housing crisis. But for low-income folks who have limited budgets, and for our no-income neighbors who will need community partners' assistance, this will allow for more non-blood-related folks to live together and provide them all with lower housing costs. For young adults looking to buy their first home, they will also be able to live with others and lower their housing costs, which will enable them to save for a down payment on a mortgage, which we all want them to be able to have. The housing crisis is going to take many tools for us to resolve. It's going to take collaboration and all community assets and partners to step up to the plate. As the city's servant leaders, that's y'all, the community expects and needs you to use tools and paths that will meet today's present reality, how people are living today. While we can learn from methods used in the past, we should not expect those past ways of thinking and planning to adequately serve today's needs and realities. This amendment is created to serve today's community and needs. It is only one tool and one step you can take, but as someone who works on the front line with the no and low income neighbors and citizens in Stevens Point, and as a mother of young adults who are hoping to buy their first home, I urge you to pass this amendment. And I also urge you as elected servant leaders to continue looking up and out for other tools, partnerships, and steps to take to establish adequate housing for all citizens and all neighbors in Stevens Point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Public hearing remains open.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission, Mayor Wiesa. My name is Deb Knipple, and I'm here on behalf of Frame Memorial Presbyterian Church, 1300 Main Street, and as a citizen of Stevens Point at 611 Sumery Avenue. I'm here to express strong support for the proposed change to the definition of household entity in our zoning code. Frame Memorial provides the physical space for the warming center from November 1st through April 1st, and I'm also a regular volunteer with the warming center. I have talked with the guests and have heard about the challenges of finding affordable housing in our community. Housing is a fundamental human need and a key step to eradicating systemic poverty. This change would allow families and individuals to combine resources to create more stable homes. Additionally, this change addresses housing insecurity. As Jane said, Stevens Point, like many communities, is facing increasing housing insecurity and homelessness. By allowing more flexible living arrangements, we can provide greater access to affordable housing options and keep people off the streets. It also maximizes existing housing. It would allow homeowners to utilize unused rooms with existing dwelling units, making more efficient use of our current housing stock. It also supports diverse households. Our current definition of family is outdated and doesn't reflect the realities of modern living arrangements. According to the U.S. Census, 46.4% of adults are single. Many individuals, including young professionals, seniors, and those on fixed incomes, could benefit from sharing housing costs with unrelated adults. This proposal is based on recommendations from the 2023 City of Stevens Point Housing Task Force report and reaffirms the 2017 City of Stevens Point Housing Study. There are several groups working on the housing issue, and this change would be a step in the right direction to allow more individuals to be housed. I urge the Planning Commission to adopt this change of definition of housing entity. It is a compassionate, practical step towards addressing housing challenges and creating a community where all can thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deb. Public hearing is still open.
Good evening, Mark Christensen, Alder District 1. I agree. I think it's good taking incremental steps, and presently we have 3 with homeowner occupied and 2 without that. I would like to see an incremental step taken in both of those categories and not just one. I would like the Planning Commission to consider maintaining that advantage to a homeowner occupied space, and instead of going from 3 and 2 to going to 3 across the board, I would advocate for actually making it 4 if it's owner occupied and 3 if it's not homeowner occupied, in order to maintain that advantage for homeowner occupied. And I think that would make it more advantageous yet for the young people to try to get into it and make it more doable financially. So that would be the one thing. And I still think that would be an incremental change. It would just be adding that 1 to both categories instead of just one category. I thank you for your consideration.
Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing and hearing no one else wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I will move to approve the amendment as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second? I'm going to second. Now we can discuss. Go ahead. We'll start with Pete and then go to Commissioner.
Start on the end, huh? All right.
Well, I think everybody's got something to say, so let's have it out.
Puzzle. A couple things. I'm not sure if a need has been demonstrated for this. There were comments, anecdotal reports. I don't know if, Adam, you've seen anything out there. But I was, wondering, we've approved a number of housing projects. We got, the North Side Yard and the Berkshire Hathaway and up by the former Kmart property and the Best Western. And so we have added a number of housing units to address, hopefully, this housing situation. I don't know if any of that is geared towards low-income folks, and to your point, I think that's a group that we should focus on serving. To the point that was brought up also about the advantage given to a homeowner of having extra people in there to help them get a house, but I was wondering if we even it up, and Mark brought this up, does that take away an advantage? Does that give an incentive to maybe convert it to rental housing as opposed to keeping it owner occupied? That suggestion going up 4 or 3 is not unreasonable. I don't know that 3 and 2 is we need to change it just yet, and we can always change it, but it's, as Adam pointed out, it's tougher to change back, and once you open it up, then you got grandfathering issues and that. So I'm not entirely clear on the need for it, and so we'll see.
Commissioner, if I may, I'm going to take some liberties here as chair. I can tell you that I've got firsthand knowledge of the need. We've got one affordable housing project approved for the north side of Stevens Point. We've got 2 more in the works, but that's not going to solve all of the issues either, as Mother Jane had said. I can tell you that hanging out downtown near the bus station, I talk to people, and there are people there who have jobs, but the jobs don't pay a lot. And if you are looking for a 1-bedroom unit in the city of Stevens Point, good luck. And even if you can find them, they're $700, $800 a month in a lot of cases. And I talked to this one young man who has a job, looking for a house, but he doesn't have a wife, he's not living with his family, and he doesn't make a whole lot of money. He can't afford a place on his own. He needs a roommate. And even then, let's say it's a 2-bedroom for, we'll ballpark it at $1,000 a month. I think that's a little high, but that's not out of the realm of possibilities here. $1,000 a month, they each pay $500. If they are making a minimum wage job, that doesn't leave enough money for a car or food or insurance, and they have to prioritize these things. So by allowing 3 people to live together, that's what we're talking about, affordability. Now those 3 people can live together, and where they would scrimp at 2 people living together, now they have a little bit more flexibility where instead of ramen and mac and cheese, maybe they can go to Taco Bell once in a while, or any other fast food place. That wasn't an endorsement. But that's really the segment of the population I think that will be most affected. When Commissioner Rice had asked how many households will this affect, it'll affect a lot of households, but I don't think most of them will be taking advantage of it. Because you still have all of the other requirements as far as square footage, so you're not going to squeeze 3 people in a 2-bedroom house unless at least 2 of those are probably in a relationship or something. But you, me, and Jeff in one house, we're not going to sit in a 2-bedroom. Unless I get the single bed.
Just to follow up on that, though, a little bit, is how do they charge? Like student housing, they charge per student in the house. They don't charge per house.
I think they charge a semester for student housing.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure.
Other places are just...
Is it just a flat rate for, like, an apartment is going to be what it's going to be regardless how many people are there?
Yeah, and I think...
A house, is that the same way? A single family, are they going to charge?
I'm not in that business, but I know someone who is, and he's a couple people down from you. He might be able to give us some better insight, but that's not going to be universal either. I think it's up to the owner of the property to determine if it's $1,000 for the whole place, or if you're going to charge,
So it's one thing if it's $1,000 for the whole place. It's another thing if it's $500 per person, regardless how many people.
Yeah, good point. That's a good point. If you're willing to yield momentarily, we can go down the line to Schuler and then Beacom, and maybe Beacom can talk a little bit about what he knows.
How about Beacom first?
All right, let's go Beacom first then.
Well, I can touch on some of those things. I definitely agree, this is, our definition of family has been outdated. I mean, I was in a relationship for 23 years with 2 girls, and we were never married. And so I think that that's more common. And one thing that I've seen in doing this for the last 15 years that I didn't see as a student here is we do have a lot of unmarried couples that rent 2 bedrooms and want to have a 3rd person live there that I turn away. So I think that that's more common. I think, millennial living preferences vary and differ from past generations. Based on some letters we got and some other things, I would add this. The threat of converting more single family to rentals is probably real. 3 tips the scale. I've always argued that kind of the boogeyman or the sky is falling, people are going to buy up these rentals. At 2 unrelated, the math isn't there. At 3, it starts to tip a little bit. Another concern I have is that if you have a 3-bedroom duplex, you're marketing it to families. You're probably marketing it to students now. And so I do think you're going to see some shifts in the market because there is the potential for more rent. You'll talk to some landlords and they'll say this unit is 800, whether there's 15 people in it or 2. I think that that's probably closer to the truth, but the reality is 3 people is more maintenance, it's more headache, that property is going to wear much faster than 2 by 50%. So landlords will charge more for those units, but if you're a student, and I'll stick with that market first, and the rent is $900 for a 2-bedroom, and now it's $300 per person, I think that that's a significant drop for the student market. It's probably a significant drop for the young professional market. So there's some positives there. The idea of the housing crisis really is within the last 5 years. People talk within 10 years, but you just didn't hear that. And COVID, distribution streams, housing, those sorts of things went crazy, and we saw it in our market. We see it, and the truth is operating housing, the cost is exponentially higher. Everybody's insurance is double. So rent is more, home prices are more. I'm not in favor of beyond 3. I think 4 would be a big mistake. I do think there's something to be said about Adam's argument for just stability. And I do feel like some neighborhoods appreciate less density, and you have a rental in a neighborhood. Now those people are parking on the street. That's something I observe. It does fundamentally change those neighborhoods too. So you have a positive, but it's offset by negatives for existing people. When this came up a year and a half ago, and I'm not surprised that we didn't see anything in 18 months, because usually if it's owner occupied, you're not going to see problems. But it was brought up, this is good for landlords. The reality is in that office, it's a mix. 50% of landlords would tell you that they're fine with it. There's probably not a huge upswing, but they're okay. 50% would say that this would drastically adversely affect their business. So that audience is split, but I don't think that that's a factor. I don't see any benefit to first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers can do this, but I don't think that you're going to see that soon. And I do think that that's an important thing every community is looking at, but I wouldn't be voting yes on that because there's nothing to suggest that's going to have an impact. But I do feel like the biggest thing is just a shift in generations, how they live together. This would be more accommodating for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Schuler.
Hard to follow that, but I'll try. I'm going to be approaching it from a lot less of the expertise angle than as a plan commissioner. There's some folks on the Plan Commission who weren't here when the Housing Task Force was here, and they weren't here for the initial discussions of why and how, right? And so we have, we're now having a discussion with some expertise and with some, in some aspects, it's kind of a generic discussion. I appreciate Commissioner Rice's question about how many units would this affect, because I don't really have an idea of just what kind of impact this would have. To me, it's just kind of a two-dimensional discussion where numbers would change and good things would happen, but it's hard to describe exactly what the good things are and to what extent they would be good, right? And I support any approach to housing that makes it more accessible to more people for a better price, right? And I think that's what everybody across the country is really looking for, kind of that silver bullet. And I guess I don't have the context to fully appreciate what a decision like this, as presented and as currently moved on, and then perhaps alternatively increased more. I don't have a real strong sense of the decision I'm making is the best and most helpful decision. And I struggle with that. So I don't have a strong basis for understanding the markets and just what happens within them. I just know that as a person inclined to really want to do something to help the housing situation, I don't fully comprehend how this absolutely does, even though I know enough people have said that this would create a benefit. That's part of what I'm thinking. And the other part is, I've always been confused by approving 3-bedroom apartment units in multi-family cases where you can't have 3 tenants in the spaces. And I know that some folks have commented that we should look at this in perhaps different types of the market. You know, do we approach multifamily and multi-unit buildings differently? If they're set up for 3, can they be allowed to have 3? Because technically speaking, they'd have the parking on site to facilitate the number of people, that type of a thing, and how that's a different situation than a single-family neighborhood. Because I think the biggest thing about a single-family neighborhood is that everyone's really concerned about density, overuse of a site, whatever, and I have a little bit more of a disconnect in understanding what the impacts might be for an incremental increase in that. So like I said, I'm kind of all over the place. I wish I was as focused as Mike. I feel good about that. But unfortunately, I don't. And so I'm supportive of positive action for this because I think as a commission and the council, ultimately, it's really important. I want to make sure that we are doing things that are building together toward a solution as opposed to sort of unrelated actions that kind of go in the right direction. So,
just to comment on your 3 bedrooms, even if it's multifamily, when I was growing up, Mom had her room, me and my brother had our room, my 2 sisters had their room. So you don't necessarily need to market it to 3 unrelated people, but if it was currently as it is, 2 unrelated, I could move in and Mary could move in with her 2 kids. And
I'm talking about like a 64-unit complex, right, where you got multiple buildings with 3-bedroom apartments. It's logical that 3 people could be able to rent them.
Could.
Especially if you're talking at younger professionals or others.
But generally, I think what you're dealing with is kids having their own rooms, probably. Even in the multi-units, 64 units, you can still have a small family living in there. So it's not that we're building these 3-bedroom units so people can have 3 unrelated in there. However, now you might be able to do something like that. And that's I think where the benefit is. Is it the be-all, end-all? It's not. But I think it does more good than harm.
And I had gone a little back and forth with Adam today and wondered about what other type of regulations apply to how space gets utilized within a unit. And he mentioned that, there are certain minimums that do restrict the amount of occupancy. And I think probably, I don't know if many commissioners understand that, and I don't know if the public understands that, or understands at what point those regulations come into play. Some people might think, oh my God, you're going to say 4 people and every place is going to have 4 people living in it. And there are other aspects of inspection and allowing the living situation that come into play, and that's generally not part of the conversation. And that's kind of good to know that people can understand how people can occupy a rental space.
Good point. Adam, you want to touch on some of those a little bit, just the highlights?
Yeah, so I think both you, Mayor, and Commissioner Schuler mentioned. So we have a stipulation in our maintenance and occupancy code that says that each occupant living within a household unit, regardless of if they're related to one another or not, there has to be at least 150 square feet of habitable floor area per occupant. So habitable means examples of a habitable space would be that of a bedroom, a living room, for example. Non-habitable room areas, these would not count towards that calculation. That would be rooms such as a bathroom, a laundry room, a closet, a hallway. So to kind of touch on what Commissioner Schuler mentioned, if you have hypothetically, you have a house that has 400 square feet of habitable floor area, and this household entity definition is amended to allow up to 3 unrelated. Because the amount of habitable floor space is less than what would be allowed for 3 people, only 2 people would be allowed regardless of if they're related or not. So that maintenance and occupancy code requirement would take precedent over the zoning code provision.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up.
Sure.
So if someone comes and wants to rent an apartment or a unit, right? And at what point do those requirements, those area requirements come into play? Can the landlord say, hey, I got a room for 3 people? At what point would the regulation say, well, no, actually, you have less than you need for 3 people, only 2 people can rent here? Where does that come in?
Who enforces that?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it would be me. Through our city assessor's office, we do have floor plans that do denote basically room by room. So if somebody would approach me, and this happens all the time, a landlord approaches me inquiring about purchasing a property, hey, how many unrelated people can I have in there? Typically, the route that I would do is look through our assessor data, calculate how much habitable floor space there is, cross-reference that to what our household entity definition is, and then ultimately give them the final answer.
Or it's on a complaint basis?
Yeah, from an enforcement standpoint, it's complaint driven.
Okay.
We have the city attorney that just popped his head in. We'll have you come to the lectern.
Just a couple comments with regards to what Commissioner Schuler mentioned. I think when we get into these conversations about definition of family, housing shortage and all that, it's easy to lose track of the fact that we have a diversity of zoning classifications. And that when we're talking about this definition, we're really just talking about single-family zoning classifications, because that's where the rubber meets the road for this. So when you talk about we're approving these apartment buildings here and there that have 3-bedroom units in it, you can put 3 unrelated in those because it is multi-family zoning. Or in a lot of those cases, it's actually with brand new structures, it is going to be like a planned unit development where there's custom zoning. So it's not like I don't think there's a huge investment thirst out there for building unusable bedrooms or places that you can only rent to families. But it's really easy when we're having this type of conversation to forget that we do in fact have multifamily districts where you can have as many unrelated people as the property is approved to hold. So,
thank you.
If I could just follow up on that.
Sure.
So I guess I thought an apartment complex was the multifamily unit. Is each individual unit a multifamily unit? Or is each unit applies
Properties are
to the...
zoned multifamily.
Pardon?
So it's not necessarily the unit. For example, the property next door to me is zoned multifamily, and it's a duplex. So they could have 3 unrelated people in each unit, because the property is multifamily, the parcel.
All right, thanks.
So I was under the impression that allowing 3 in a 3-bedroom was not the case, but it is the case?
It depends on the
It's
underlying
zoned
zone.
multifamily, yes.
Yes, sorry. That's aggressive. Close to the mic. So as Attorney Beveridge mentioned, I mean, a lot of our multifamily developments in the past, it required a planned development rezoning. And I know some examples, I believe the apartment complex on Maria that was constructed in 2020, this was before my time, but I'm almost positive as part of that planned development rezoning, one of the exceptions granted by this commission was that of amending the requirements of the family definition as worded at that time.
Okay.
So it's basically a case-by-case basis for the multifamily. If it's a planned development rezoning, it's up to this commission to decide if there's any exceptions granted.
Okay, because I've asked that previously and heard a different answer, and I must have misheard, so I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, so I guess to be a little more specific, when you have multifamily zoning, it doesn't just mean that you can have multiple units upon a single parcel. It's, sometimes many, many units upon a single parcel. It also affects what, who can live within a given unit. So.
Oh, yeah, that's been the only question, so thank you.
So we're good with Arnson, Schuler, and Beacom. Commissioner Rice, anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Seems likely, doesn't it? Yeah, maybe just a couple follow-up comments. Because, one of my concerns, Commissioner Beacom and Commissioner Arnson kind of brought up is, and I don't know the answer to this, but I have a similar concern, is the idea of kind of like price escalation. If we say that there can be a third person in significantly more units, do landlords just take advantage of that market opportunity and then increase the price? And I'm guessing the answer is some do and some don't. So again, hard to pinpoint really that net advantage. What's that net good? To Commissioner Schuler's point, I don't, just a comment really more than anything. I guess I'd also be curious to explore the commission's appetite to kind of leverage this type of zoning modification to specific zoning classes. I think we generally are hesitant to do that, and I'd be curious to get Adam's input on that too. Again, thinking that this change in ordinance really primarily affects rental properties, and most of our single family zoning probably has very limited rental properties. Does it make sense to stipulate that this ordinance is only effective in R3 and more dense? Again, that's maybe not best practice, but I'm curious if you have any opinions about that.
Yeah, I guess the one pause for concern I would have is, so how the city is developed as it relates to the zoning classifications. It follows basically the condo-centric model. Not going to get into planning theory and planning jargon, but basically what it says is that the more dense areas of town, the higher density zoning districts are located within the downtown and the periphery of the downtown, and you gradually go through cones outside of the downtown through lower zoning classifications. Meaning that basically the outskirts of town have your lowest density, working on your way into the downtown area. I guess my one pause for concern is that as it relates to our multifamily districts, it is frankly a hodgepodge in a way. We have our periphery of the downtown, we have areas along our Division Street corridor, east side of town. I guess I would leave it up to you as a commission. Is it your preference to try to compact this type of change within one part of town, or are you okay rather with having this change be more fluid, that's going to touch on various portions, various geographical areas of the city? If you're fine with the latter, then changing our family definition by zoning classification would be appropriate. If you'd rather compact that within a given area, you're not necessarily going to achieve that basing it by zoning district.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, that's all for now. Thank you.
Your turn.
Well, I certainly appreciate the testimony that the public gave today, and I appreciate the discussion from our fellow commissioners. Like Commissioner Arneston, I still have questions about the language that I need clarification over. And like Commissioner Schuler, it's a little bit concerning to me that the impacts, besides allowing for more housing for unrelated people, I don't think is well understood. So what are the impacts on parking downtown? Thinking about the Buchholz Park neighborhood area. We got snow coming in just a little while. What is that going to look like? How much impact will that have on street parking availability? I think those concerns need to be addressed. I really do.
Okay. Thank you. Alderperson Nebo.
Well, I guess I could start with, the way I read the language is that when Blanche needed roommates, she put up an ad and she got Rose and Dorothy and Sophia was Dorothy's mother. So there's a homeowner with two unrelated individuals, Rose and Dorothy, with Sophia as the dependent of one of the individuals, and they all seem to get along. I would then bring...
That was multifamily housing, right? So that's already covered.
It was a single-family home as far as I can remember.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And Blanche was always on the lanai. I'll bring it back to a situation I could easily find myself in. If my financial situation were to drastically change, I would find myself living on $1,500 a month. And that's not a lot of money when most rental apartments, I think the studio apartments at Northside Yard are over $1,000 a month. There's no way I could afford to live in a place like that. Every day on Facebook and Stevens Point area happening, I see people saying, where can I find housing for my family? We can't afford, these big places. I think the folks that'll be affected the most will probably be the least in our community. They probably won't have, each one would have a car because they probably can't afford a car. If this can get 2 or 3 people into housing and secure and able to continue on with their life, I think it's a good thing. I'm in support. I don't know that I like the incremental approach. I think just adding one person could make a lot of difference in the life of a lot of people that are on the margins now, that are just barely getting by. Someone made a comment, I think at Finance Committee, that they volunteer for Laundry Love, and there was a person that came and the woman said, we're trying so hard to save enough money just to get a down payment on a house. They can't even afford to do their laundry. How are they going to afford that down payment? If they could find a couple of roommates, they might be able to move into secure housing. So for me, to add one person, the good outweighs some of the unknowns that we might be concerned about. It's not like we're adding 5 or 6 people. We're basically just adding one more to the one that we already allow. So just one person, but that one person, that might be the key to their house, to their housing. So in my mind, I want to go in support of the least of the people in our community, the ones that need the help the most. I feel that as a steward leader, that would be my responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do the, how do they, in the football draft where you go back?
Snake draft?
Snake draft, yeah, we're gonna do that. Just for the record, I Googled it, and the house that the Golden Girls lived in, the actual house it was filmed in, was sold in 2020 for $4 million. So probably a little out of our price range.
See, it's why she had to bring in Dorothy, Sophia, and Rose to afford that mortgage.
Commissioner Muscoviac.
Yep. God bless the Golden Girls.
The question is for Adam. Are there any comparable communities that we might look to that are in a similar situation or have adopted a similar policy?
As far as a change, going from a 2 to 3, comparable communities, of course, as it relates to other college towns here in the state. I will say, when we went through this exercise a few years back, Point was one of the more restrictive communities compared to most. Most college communities that I recall fell generally within the 3 to 4 unrelated range.
All right, thank you.
And we'll go back. Commissioner Rice, anything to add? Commissioner Beacom?
Just a couple of things. We were talking about the math and how it works. As recent as probably 2015, 2016, if I was looking at a duplex, my math was going to be somewhere between 25 and 30,000 per bed. So if that's 4 people, 100 to 120, and that same duplex now is between 160 and 200. So if your math is 25 to 30 per person, and you're looking at a single-family home with 2 people, you're not going to find a lot in that. In fact, the only 2 single families that we bought for rentals were because people encouraged us to buy them, and they were in the 50 to 60,000 range, and they did not do well on that. At this, you are going to see that flip a little bit. So you are going to see people looking for houses that they can put 3 people in, and they can make the math work. That will be a factor. But something I didn't get to touch on before, my only concern is just the amount of growth. North side yards at current, we're not looking too good. And we've got a lot of things we're looking to put throughout the city in terms of new housing. And so a lot of change all at once can be scary. This is something that I've been advocating for, the Housing Task Force. I think people universally felt we are one of the most restrictive in the state. So I do think from that standpoint it's good, but I'm a little worried 10, 15 years from now when you add the amount of housing that we have and we're looking at what that's going to do to the market, because that could be some considerable issues that we just don't have the foresight for. And the idea of lowering rents and home costs, I think that this will raise some segments in terms of home sales. I do think it'll help reduce rent. I think we're going to see a bunch of other problems, though.
Okay, Commissioner Schuler.
Again, I guess I have a couple different things. First is, if this is to get recommended to council, what's the typical type of discussion that would happen at council about an item like this? Is there an opportunity for discussion or?
Anything goes. If you've ever watched a council meeting, all the gloves come off.
Okay.
Honestly, it's the same as we would have a discussion here. There's not a public hearing, but we don't stifle public comments at all. As a matter of fact, it's an ordinance that any actionable item from council must take public input.
Actually, I was talking about discussion within the council itself, because we have a certain group of people here. There's always appreciative when council members are here, but there are different people, different backgrounds, different personalities, in a good way, right? Not a bad way. And I just wonder, we seem inclined to be in favor of moving something forward in some form. We have a motion for something. And I just wondered if the council, if there's anything that you would need between now and when you would consider it to help you have whatever discussion you'd like to have, because you're not part of the discussion tonight, really. So I guess I'm wondering, is there anything we can do as a group to help the council have a really good opportunity to have the best discussion they have if they get a chance to vote on this? Is there something that staff can provide? Because why wouldn't I want to obligate staff? That just would be fine.
Let me ask you this then, or maybe not ask, but offer up this alternative. First of all, we've had a couple of alders participate. They generally do. Not everybody. We've got Alder Shuda online. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 6 alders present at this meeting right now. They have the ability to ask all the questions, gather all the information that they need. But if there's something that you or any member of this body thinks would be relevant to the alderperson's decision, you are certainly in a position where you could, I thought we had more than that, so we have 7. You are in a position where you could ask staff to provide that information to the council prior to, because we got 2 weeks before council.
Right.
So we could do that if you think there's something that the council would be interested in knowing, or any alderpersons or citizen members that are watching and listening. You can certainly call staff and ask for the information so we have it prepared for council's discussion.
I don't know if anyone, and I know for sure I don't, understand the actual impact of this. And you want to be able to talk to people, this is going to do X, Y, or Z, right? This is the palpable results of this action that was taken. And at the same time, it's, like I mentioned before, it's in service of this larger thing we're trying to achieve, right? And this is how it helps achieve that. Okay. And this is sort of an isolated action, albeit understood as good. Mm-hmm. But I guess I'm hoping that there's something that maybe the council doesn't need any additional advice, but I just know that I don't understand how large of an impact this would have. And you want to, again, make impactful decisions, right? And I don't right now understand just how large or small of an impact this would have. And if there's anything that staff could provide, any estimate of just how many units this would affect, but even as I say that, I'm like, how the hell are you going to find that out, right?
How the heck? Yeah,
Jeepers.
But
How can you
honestly,
figure that out?
Commissioner
I
Schuler,
don't know.
that's why we asked you to be on, because you have that perspective. On anything we do here, we're really just kind of making our best educated guess.
Mm-hmm.
We know that this is going to do some good. We know that there'll probably be some bad side effects, but at least I believe that I think the number of good things will outweigh the number of adverse side effects. But we're really speculating.
Yeah.
It's a best guess. But we have very good, trained, professional staff that we pay mediocre money to.
The best that our money can afford.
To do that.
Yeah. And, I guess I would also say that as a commissioner, it would be nice now that we have a new director, whoever he is.
Well, dang it, I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And,
that was...
that guy, we have that guy, and we have some fairly new commissioners, and it really would be nice to, for those that weren't here for the previous housing discussion, to get, I guess, an item on some agenda to say, let's talk about the housing issues that really are, and to give the commissioners some, again, perspective on how we can understand conversations and be most helpful.
And if I may, since it's timely for next month we get to do the statutory housing affordability report, statutorily required housing affordability report. So next month will be the perfect time to have that conversation, since we have to do it anyways. So.
Yeah, if only to acknowledge how really not helpful that information the state requires is, right? But
come on now.
yes,
I could speak at length.
That's a conversation for another day.
Yes. Okay.
Did we get everybody, Mr. Arnson?
Yeah, I got one more, and maybe a motion.
We already have one.
We have one.
Oh, but he wants to
But I can
amend.
maybe amend it.
Oh, you want an amendment?
Because I'm thinking that really the only detriment to this would be to the single-family housing market. So that would be what, R1 and R2? R3 is single and two-family housing. And there's a desire to kind of protect that single-family housing. And so if this were to apply to R3 and above, the single-family residences would still receive a bit of a advantage. I don't know how big of an advantage it is, but those types of neighborhoods, those R1, R2 neighborhoods are, tend to be, I guess I don't know, but I assume they're more personal, they're more private, they're more individual, less open to, having a bunch of people in the residences, unrelated, parking on streets, things like that. So, and I guess I'd ask Adam first, is that practical to have this proposed change only apply to the higher residency districts, meaning R1 and R2 would still have the owner plus one and non-owners just the two?
Yeah, honestly, I think the better approach to try to grasp what you're getting at, Pete, would be to really base it off of land use versus that of zoning classification of the property. The reason I'm saying that is, to give an example.
What do you mean by land use versus zoning, I guess?
Yeah, so land use being like all properties that are utilized as single-family housing, or as a single-family use versus two-family use, triplex, et cetera, versus that of basing this land use regulation by the zoning classification of the parcel. The reason I'm saying this is, we have segments of our city that are used for single-family use, that are utilized for single-family purposes, but are zoned a random zoning district, right? The area I'm thinking of that stands out is Bliss Ave corridor heading towards Public Utility Department. All those lots along Bliss Ave and some of the sub-streets are zoned M2 heavy industrial. but they have a single-family use. With a change like that of what you're describing, Pete, technically those properties, while they're used as a single family, they could tap into this change in our zoning ordinance to their advantage if they so please do. So if you want to add protection strictly for single family uses, I would make that determination. I would codify the language so that it's based off of single family uses and not the zoning district of the property.
I don't know that I agree with that, because if you're in a manufacturing district, you might, even if you got a single-family house there, you might be inclined to expect some inconveniences, big trucks, lots of people, et cetera. But areas that are specifically zoned for single-family are kind of set up, and I think they're kind of minor, the areas of just R1, R2, a lot of R3 out there, the single and two family, and that would be open to, but going by zoning, it's defined as that single family and could be preserved there. And if somebody was buying a residence in this single family area, they know it stayed single family. Whereas in the two family area, somebody could buy it and all of a sudden open it up to, 3 different families in the house. And those areas that are already zoned for that type of use, 1 or 2 family, may be more receptive, may be more suitable for it, whereas those are R1 and R2, single family, are less accepting. Odds are probably be less likely to want to use the expanded definition. And so I think that by limiting it, it wouldn't limit what we're after, trying to find more affordable housing. That's still most of the zoning districts, but still kind of leaves a little sanctuary haven, a little area where those things wouldn't apply. And so I could see some advantage to excluding R1, R2 zoning districts from this expanded definition and just go with the non-owner, 2 entities, homeowner, 1 plus 2, or a plus 1 entity. I don't know, members, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I was kind of prodding down that same path there, and I'm inclined to agree with you that does move the needle, looking towards some of the advantages we do believe this would give us. Again, knowing that the primary effect is on rental properties, which are probably somewhat limited in that R1 and R2 anyway, so it doesn't exclude a significant amount of properties from kind of achieving this advantage. And it also potentially prevents some of the speculative kind of real estate buying that Commissioner Beacom has suggested might happen if you do open up 3 unrelated renters in a single family home, which is certainly something we don't want. We want to continue to incentivize owner occupied housing. So I'm inclined to agree with you there.
I would as well. I think what would happen a year and a half ago was incremental, but I think the feeling was we were always going to get to this point. So it wasn't, this is where we are, we're taking steps. I'd rather take smaller steps and not shock the market. But I've said many times on this commission, we need more single-family homeowners, and I say that as a landlord. A healthy housing market has people that eventually work their way up, buy a home, that keeps them in the community. That's where they can build equity and wealth. And to Commissioner Schuler's point, the reality is nobody up here and nobody out there has any idea what impact this is going to have. We're all guessing. And I'm concerned that if you guess wrong too many times, we have a good thing and we can start to move in the other direction. So I would be for that as a step, with the understanding, and maybe a year and a half from now, we take the next step depending on how it goes.
You can always take that next step, right? You don't have to take it all at once. So I guess, yes, I would make a motion, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but that the proposed amendment, the 3 entities per household would apply to zoning classifications R3 and above. So exclude the single-family residential zoning classification.
All right, so to rephrase, if I may, the change in definition would only apply to R3 and above, so R3, R4, R5, and so on. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's an easier way to say that.
All right.
Alderperson Nebo, were you going to second, or do you have a comment?
I was just going to make a comment.
Let's see if we get a second first.
Second.
All right, seconded by Rice on the amendment.
Okay.
Now, just on the amendment.
Okay, it's more to what was just said about encouraging single-family homes.
All right,
I don't know
Logan's
if
not in the room, so go ahead.
When I graduated from UWSP in 1991 and then did 2 years of grad school at UW-Madison, I graduated with $24,000 in debt, and that was 30 years ago. If you're coming out of college, you got your first job, you've got this massive student loan debt, how in the heck are you gonna save enough money for that down payment to buy that single-family home? It's gonna be really, really hard. And yeah, that's what we would all like to see. But the reality is, a lot of the folks that'll buy that first home are still paying off their student loans, sadly.
But I would say that there are opportunities in the R1, R2, or in the 1 and 2 family districts, the R3. So maybe you focus your sights on those areas rather than the single-family residential area.
I'll say I think I paid my student loan off. I was 32, 33 years old, something like that. And if my wife and I hadn't been able to buy a duplex as our first home, I don't know that I would still be a homeowner. We needed to make it work, and those are the options you have. Figuring out how you can afford to pay a mortgage and everything else, especially with a child or two or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, looking back, that was how we got our start. We bought a duplex.
In a 1 and 2 family.
It was a multifamily.
Zoning
Yeah, multifamily. I don't remember. It's right across the street from where I live now. Do you remember my area, Chris? Do you know? I think it's just multifamily. I don't know if it's R2 or R3.
Probably R3.
But the home ownership doesn't change because we already have that in the book, right? So if somebody wanted to buy a home and this idea that they could buy it and rent it, that's on the books.
Only in the owner-occupied piece. So
Right, but that's-
I lived in 716. We rented 718.
Well, you'd still be able to do that for a duplex.
I could rent, but only 2 people.
Right.
Right, 2 unrelated people at the time. And that wasn't a problem back then, but there aren't a whole lot of duplexes on the market.
Do we have an issue with the first motion on the table and a second motion?
We don't have a second motion. We have a
Or
motion to amend.
a second on the motion?
We have a second on the motion to amend, and that's what we're discussing right now. So the amendment, as I said, is going to be that the household entity definition, as presented, would only apply to R3 and above. Does anybody have any additional comments on that?
What would need to be inserted into the main motion to make that accomplished specifically?
So, nothing, right? If the motion passes, then we add to the original motion that it only applies to R3 and above.
That was my question. Where physically in that first part? Right now, we've got that section with that paragraph, and the paragraph doesn't have any relation to...
Well, it says the entity shall not apply to tourist rooming houses or R2 and R1 zoning classification.
So you would suggest it go there?
Something
I just want
along
to
those
understand
lines.
what we're voting on.
I'll let
Okay.
the attorney and the zoning administrator figure that one out.
Before we vote.
As long as we understand what that means.
Okay.
Any additional comments? Comments from the audience on the amendment? That this would only apply to R3 and above.
Is that us, the audience?
Yep, you're the only audience I see.
Okay.
If you have a comment, step to the lectern. And while they're doing that, I'll go on record saying that I don't think this is enough. So I'm not supportive of the amendment.
I really appreciate this discussion because you're all taking this really seriously and taking the health of Stevens Point and the future health of Stevens Point seriously. Young adults do not live like when you bought your house, or when you bought your house, or when you bought your house. So we're thinking about how, when I bought my house. But most young adults are not in that situation, nor are they going to be for several years. And I think that's a missing factor here. So when those R1 and R2s get taken off the market for this, my 28-year-old son could not buy that single-family home and ask 3 of his friends to live with him so that he could make the mortgage payment. You've taken that off the table. So I just want to stand up and talk about that, because I think we are forgetting that we are living, our young adults are living in a different reality than we did when we graduated, and we cannot forget that.
Thank you. Alderperson Lang, are you just standing up to stretch your legs? Okay.
I'd also like to echo the comment of thank you for really thinking about this, because this is something that's going to take a lot of consideration. Listening to those discussions that I've just heard, I would like to say I'm opposed to this amendment to this. I think you're taking this a little bit too far, in the sense of what we're trying to do here is accomplish a way to expand housing opportunities in our community. And by moving it to just these zonings, the Rs, that you're talking 1 and 2, you've taken, like we just heard, people's options off the table. And I would hope that what we're trying to accomplish here through this is we're going to expand housing as much as possible. If you were to consider an amendment, I would also say I'd support, as we heard before, moving it to incentivize home ownership at a 4 and moving this to 3. That could be also accomplished here through y'all tonight with amending that, but like to this amendment, I say you're taking away that option for many people to just open up their home. And that's why I'd be opposed to it.
Any other comments from the audience? Okay, we are only voting on the amendment. This has nothing to do with the original motion, only the amendment, and the amendment is that the change in definition, should it pass, would only apply to zoning districts R3 and above. Okay? If you're in favor, you'll vote yes. If you are opposed, you'll vote no. And I will do a roll call. You can keep track of this, Adam, if you want. Weeza votes aye. Kneebone? I'm sorry. Weeza votes nay. Kneebone?
No.
Arnson?
Yes.
Beacom?
Yes.
Muscoviac?
No.
Rice?
Yes.
Schuler?
No.
4 noes, 3 yeses.
4 noes, 3 yeses. The motion fails. So we are now back to our original motion, which is to approve as presented. If someone else has an amendment they'd like to offer, now would be the appropriate time. Otherwise, we will vote on the original motion. Seeing none, the original motion is to approve as presented. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Same way.
I'll just say with the wordsmithing that Mother Jane mentioned.
Yes, with the wordsmithing, right, from the English teacher. All right, if you're opposed, you will vote no. If you are in favor, you will vote yes, and we'll go backwards. Schuler?
Aye.
Rice?
Yes.
Muscoviac?
Yes.
Beacom?
Yes.
Arnson?
Yes.
Neon?
Aye.
And Weeza votes aye. That is unanimous consent. That is approved. It'll be forwarded to council. Council will take this up at their action in 2 weeks from today.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I guess now that our conversation's been resolved, I guess I'm curious if staff can, when it gets to council, I guess give them a good idea of just what type of tracking or understanding of the situation will be now that it's different and there are different opinions on what is good or not. If there's a way to explain to the public and the council just exactly what can be done to track this over time, and I guess after a certain amount of time, talk about it at committee and say, okay, this is really the changes we've seen, whether it be a little, a lot, or whatever.
Understood. Thank you very much. And that's a very good time to introduce our newest Community Development Director that I so egregiously forgot to do at the beginning of the meeting. Jared Kivala has been employed with the city now since October 15th. He's the new Community Development Director. It's only a couple of weeks here, so we're still getting our feet wet. But Jared, this will be the task assigned to your department. If you could work with your team and provide counsel with some insight on how we might be able to track this. Again, we're speculating, we know this, and we're not going to have solid numbers, but if there's something we can do, short of how many complaints have we got, how many issues have we had, in 2 weeks, we'd like to have that presented a little bit at council.
Happy to.
All right, item number 5, the one I've been waiting for. Discussion and possible action on a clear zone and Avigation easement for an unaddressed parcel bounded by State Highway 66 and the unaddressed parcel closest to Wellfield Road North with parcels identified in your packet. We talked about Avigation.
Avigation.
Or Avigation.
Avigation.
Why is it aviation, aviary, avionics then?
I don't know. Avigation is navigation in the
You're
air.
sure of this?
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, I'm going to go with him because he gets paid the mediocre bucks to know these things. Avigation, all right.
A mediocre answer, I don't know.
Director, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so, boy.
It's behind you too.
Yeah. The area that is the airport and has been the airport forever, in a CSM was split up into 3 lots. Lot 1 being the airfield portion, the big portion. Lot 2 being this area that you see here, and Lot 3 being another area. These parcel lines needed to be straightened out and kind of moved around and swapped between city and city, one of those cities being city proper, one of those cities being city airport, in order to put the fence where it is right now. And when we transferred those parcels by way of CSM, we noted on the CSM that there is an Avigation easement.
Certified survey map.
Certified survey map. There's an Avigation and clear space easement held. The Bureau of Aeronautics, goes through different people and everything else, and they said that's not a conveyance document. So they want what we did back in 2016 to be documented by way of this easement as well as the next quitclaim deed, even though I think it's maybe a little bit of duplicate action. It's documenting what we've already done in a different way.
Thank you.
Yep.
And at least we settled the pronunciation thing. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion? Did someone say motion to approve? I didn't hear that. Thought somebody did.
Yep, in unison.
Was that you, Commissioner Rice? Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll move to.
I will second the clear zone
Seconded by Ms.
application
Goviak.
easement.
Discussion?
I don't want to be the only one in the minutes next month.
Discussion? Comments from the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that's approved. Item number 6 is the request to execute a quitclaim deed between the City of Stevens Point and the City of Stevens Point Airport for the property located at 4401 State Highway 66 with the parcel identified in your packet. Director?
This is identifying the big parcel, parcel 1 of that certified survey map, and it is the city quitclaiming it to the city, but specifically the municipal airport, because there are federal grant assurances tied to that.
Okay. Thoughts, comments, or a motion?
Well, I guess a question, right, the city is granting it to the city, but is it like a department transferring to another department essentially?
Well, you could look at it
Airport break off and become a private airport?
No, it has more to do with the fact that we are charged with responsible development, zoning, things like that. And you can't therefore just sell a piece of the airport because it's, we've made assurances to the FAA that we won't. And so by having some slightly different ownership naming conventions, it's easier for future decision makers, future staff, future everything to go, oh, this is somehow different. Why is this called airport? Specifically for the airport, it applies to things that aren't contiguous with the airport. We have property west of the interstate that we'll probably do a similar quitclaim for at some point in the future. This one was needed now because we're doing some certain clearing, and across 66. So those will probably be before you in the months ahead. But it's really just to signify lands that are federally obligated through the grants that we get through state and federal sources.
Commissioner, this does happen occasionally. I'll give you a recent example that was kind of a pain in the butt. The city of Stevens Point owns the footprint that the Shopko building used to be on. The city of Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority owns the parking lot outside of that footprint, which caused a problem when we went for a EPA cleanup grant because they were under two different owners technically. We do the same thing with the housing authority. So that it does happen where there are different entities under the giant city umbrella. Okay, did we get a motion?
No.
Thoughts, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve the quit claim from Stevens Point to Stevens Point.
Thank you. We're going to become the second. City of Stevens Point to the City of Stevens Point Airport. Any discussion there? Comments from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that's approved. Item number 7 is a discussion-only item. That is a petition document from the City of Stevens Point Municipal Airport for state and federal aid. Director.
Repeat from last month with new items. So this memo is the same, but in the resolution and in the agreement that we signed following the resolution, there's more project material. This is because recently they've released a 5-year capital plan and our awareness of more dollars that are available. So we're adding planning documents to our petition along with more hangar area development. Ultimately, what this lets us do is leverage about $5.5 million over 5 years with only, it's under 200,000 in local share, I think, so.
Great. Thoughts, comments, discussion? We don't need a motion.
I will point out again that it's really just, they mention Plan Commission, but don't talk about action at Plan Commission. So the fact that it's being discussed here lets everybody know that there is a public hearing at council, a resolution at council, and then an agreement that will be followed, or that will be signed following that if it's approved, if the resolution's approved.
Right.
Yep.
Box checked. Okay. If anybody watching or listening that isn't here, or even if you are here and you come up with an idea later, like 3 o'clock in the morning when you're sitting in bed and you can't sleep, you can contact the airport or the Director of Public Utilities office. All right, item number 8 is our director's report. Director, you want to jump into this one?
Of course, happy to. Thank you. I was going to come around and shake everyone's hand afterwards. So appreciate the brief introduction, but I'll come and properly greet you shortly. So some notable events. So there was a historic preservation meeting that Adam organized. It was an open house for the public to view, hear more, provide input on the draft historic preservation plan. I know there were a few, Kneebone, I believe you were there, and Christensen, I believe you were there. So there were a few attendees from council, which was great, but overall I think there was, 15 people approximately? So pretty good turnout. Adam, you did a great job. That is still obviously available for viewing. I did provide the link in my report, so please take a look, get Adam any questions, comments that you may have. There was a Safe Streets and Roads for All public information meeting on October 29th. Pretty good turnout for that as well. They had a lot of great visuals. There were some toy cars and trucks, so if they do have another PIM with those, you should definitely attend. It was great, playful time. CAP Services Fall Appreciation Event. There's some really notable partnerships that came out of that, including Habitat for Humanity as a part of CAP's Housing Stability Program. Next Home assisted with their Family Crisis Center. Stevens Point Area School District had some early childhood development, and then Central Rivers Farm Shed was a part of their Uplift program. So some really great community partnerships, just wanted to highlight those. Development updates, Forest Creek Subdivision. Really notable, great progress, utilities, right-of-way. I do not have a timeline for that, but appears that could go in at any time. Staff is working on how the lots will be marketed. Our TID 14, all of the paperwork has been submitted to the state for that. So we should be good to go with that. Shopko sites, demolition is complete, if you hadn't seen that already. Site has been hydro-seeded, and then the fence should be coming down soon. City Hall, we did have a conversation at the last council meeting with some county representatives who offered some insights into their situation, and then we will have another discussion on that City Hall topic coming up at the next council meeting. So more to come on that. And then just general department updates. We did have an injury in the department, and there will be an LTE inspector that will be joining our team for a short time to fill in, try to have as minimal disruption to services as possible. But if you do come in, you may see a new face for a short time.
Actually, he went through orientation this morning, I believe.
He did. He went through orientation this morning, and he already was doing inspections for us. So we were super fortunate to find an individual on such a short time frame that had all of the credentials we needed, as well as had our customer-oriented mindset. So we were really fortunate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that no shade intended to anybody who's not here, but I very much appreciated the written report. Thank you.
Of course. And I guess as a comment to that, if you guys do have any questions prior to these meetings that you would like an update on, please just send me an email. I will make sure it is in the report. And if there's a structure you don't like as a part of the report, just let me know, and I will find an alternative for that as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With that, our agenda is exhausted, and we are adjourned at 7:30.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.